make it out to CP Telethon or just CP?
CP Center.
CP Center, okay. Yeah, I don't have a check with me, but I'll bring one. Okay. Sure, you're welcome. Happy to help.
You know, my sister-in-law's mother keeps emailing me. Could you please keep him in Wisconsin? We don't want him here in New York City. Yeah, things are bad.
Well, I mean, you know, what can I argue? That's really a gift to them. Just the whole idea.
Yeah, but you know, but in the meantime, he's been good to stay.
I just asked Brenda, she didn't
It's
know.
already done. Continues to. And his budget just, it's a real bloodletting all the way around.
What for? $200 in property tax relief, which I barely notice. I shouldn't have to notice $200 in property tax relief. Does that own a home? Related arts. In every district you go to calls it something else.
There's two Big Macs.
We call it when they're on sale.
When they're on sale.
2 Big Macs are on sale, Chris. Big Macs are more than $5.
All right, I'd like to call the work session to order. First, we'll start with our, well, first I'll say who's here. We have 6 board members present at the table. I think Andrew's coming, but he's running late probably. Also, we're joined at the table to my left by Dr. Michelle Langenfeld, our superintendent, our board secretary, Sandy Heller, our Intercity Student Council president, Lo-Keen Chang from Preble, and members of the superintendent's cabinet around the rest of the table. Then we'll move to our public forum, which is a chance for people from the community to speak before the board on any issue that is of concern. I don't have any forms filled out tonight, but is there anyone who would like to speak before the board? Seeing none, we will move to our agenda, which begins with teaching and learning work session, which will be facilitated by Katie Maloney.
Thank you, Brenda. We have 3 discussion items, and our first one will be the Head Start self-assessment report.
Thank you.
And, oh, there's Sally. I was going to say, Sally was right there.
Hi, Sally.
We've asked Sally to join the table, and I'm really glad that she can be here. Based on our recent review and audit, I'd really like to celebrate that the information gathered, for the first time ever, we had no areas of noncompliance during the course of the review. So because of that, no corrective action is required at this time. And it also put us into eligibility for a non-competitive 5-year grant award to operate the Head Start program for the Green Bay School District. So I'd really like to thank the board, the Head Start Policy Council, staff and parents of the Head Start community, and especially Sally, Dan, and Mary McCabe for their leadership in really offering a high-quality preschool program for Green Bay area public schools. So we're here this evening to meet the federal requirements for the yearly assessment, which requires that the board approve the self-assessment process summary program improvement plan. And we'll open it up to any questions you may have.
Any questions or comments? Mike?
Terry, would you or Sally amplify on that 5-year grant? Is that in addition to our regular funding, and would that allow us to serve more children? How would that work, and what would it be for?
The Office of Head Start 3 years back has changed their monitoring of Head Start programs nationwide. In the past, we've been in indefinite grant periods. So since 1966, Head Start has had a grant with the Green Bay Public Schools as a grantee agency, and then we received reviews every 3 years, but they were indefinite grant periods, and the Office of Head Start has now changed that to 5-year grant periods. So once you get through your final monitoring review, which we did last April and May, and once you pass all areas, you are now eligible for the 5-year grant period. So what will happen, we are in process of writing, we're in year 1 of that 5-year process. The writing of the grant has changed quite a bit. So we've received the application instructions, and we're in process of doing that. The grant will be due to the federal government May 1st. I believe it's coming as a consent item in March for the grant dollar amount, which has not changed. It's the exact same dollar amount. So we were funded for the exact same amount of children, 321 this year as last year. The grant period will begin July 1st. We'll receive a brand-new grant number, and that will happen then every 5 years. So every 5 years, the grant will close out, and we'll have a new grant period of 5 years.
So the advantage is we have 5 years rather than 3.
Correct, and what they'll be doing is in years 1 through 4, they'll be sending smaller teams from the federal government to review various areas of the program. So instead of sending a team of 10 and reviewing all areas of Head Start, year 1, they'll be sending a smaller team to review safe environments and the health requirements for Head Start. Year 2, they'll come and they'll review the fiscal management and human resource management, and so on and so forth. Year 5 is nothing, it's kind of a year off. And then, once that's passed, then you start all over again with a 5-year grant project, so.
What are the chances that we can get additional funding? Because we do have some children on waiting lists, correct?
A very small waiting list, because what we
Okay.
did this year was we have enrolled so many more 3-year-olds and are directing our 4-year-olds to the 4K program in the
4K,
district.
okay.
So it's worked beautifully. We're at about 75% 3-year-olds. But we still need to maintain some of those 4s, particularly the collaborations that we do with 4K, so that we can get reimbursement with DPI and all of that through 4K. But we have about 40 children on the wait list, and we're constantly, rolling that wait list because we have so much transition within our current program. So we're doing very well. There's a lot of expansion dollars going on at the federal level, but primarily for the birth to 3, which they call the Early Head Start,
Okay.
and also the Early Head Start and Child Care Partnerships. So because we do not enroll birth to 3, but we do collaborate with the CISA 7 agency, which enrolls Brown County and Green Bay School District birth to 3 children.
All right, good. Thank you for your good work and your entire staff.
Welcome.
Mary?
Miss Sally, I understand that you received some of your grant application materials late. Did you need an extension, or are you going to be able to get that in?
We did
Without-
request a 30-day extension, and we received it
And that
immediately.
new date is May
May 1st.
1st?
Mhm.
And
And the
that's not
reason for that is
problematic?
the application came 5 weeks later than the
Right.
information memorandum or the regulations stated. We're supposed to get it 6 months prior to our grant period, which would have been January 1st. And Brenda received it home on February 5th, I believe, and it was in my hands around the 8th or 9th. So we immediately requested the 30-day extension, mainly, not only because it was late, but the extensive instructions of this first-year grant application.
So you don't expect that May 1st is going to be
Nope,
problematic?
not at all. We're gonna do good. We're rolling along good with the grant right now. We'll be
Sally
fine.
really started preparing even before we received the information and began some of the pieces that we were able to begin prior to receiving the instructions. So they started doing inventories and some of the things that they knew ahead of time could be done regardless
That
to
sounds
help
like Sally.
prepare.
Very good. Chris?
I have about
And
4
Brenda.
questions. First of all, thank you for.
Excuse me,
for
4
doing out there.
questions?
I've heard many nice things since you as a minister have been
Thank you.
at the site. It's obviously, at least that's a piece of how this is improved, so. In about 25 words or less, would you talk a little bit about COPA, child outcomes planning and assessment, what that instrument is and how it's administered and where it's kept and all that?
It's the technology system that we use in Head Start. It would be comparable to the Infinite Campus for the district. We have tried for years to get them to get along together so that we're not doing some double entry in 2 different programs such as attendance. We need to enter attendance in Infinite Campus, and we also need to enter it into the COPA system. The COPA system was designed for Head Start program information. So for instance, we need to document every home visit, every referral to every community agency that we do in Head Start. There are so many more areas of accountability that we need to track for the federal government in the COPA system that Infinite Campus does not have.
So, may I ask, the information here, does that follow youngsters, should that child move to another district and enter another Head Start program, or is it just?
About 90% of the programs in the state use COPA, but it would not travel from program to program. Like, for instance, another Head Start program that uses COPA could not get the information from our program through the system. But it is a web-based system. We pay a fee of $3,500 a year for COPA There are other programs out there, but COPA is the one that we favor.
Okay.
And then we have a technology coordinator on staff that manages that COPA system for us.
Is it onerous or?
Is it what?
Onerous, difficult, a lot of work with it, time
Well, it's easy to
consuming?
go in and search for a child or family information, but it's extremely involved with, she sets up programs. So for instance, the report card or the 3-period assessment data that we enter that into COPA, and then she goes in and creates the reports. If I want to see, how our boy students versus our girl students are doing, or sometimes once I said to her, I want to see how the physical development of all of our children according to the zip codes in the city of Green Bay. I wanted to, compare. So she goes in and filters and creates programs, and that's way above anybody else on her staff could do.
Okay. I have 3 others, but if you want to go to.
Go.
Okay. Obviously, we're happy that there were any areas that were very problematic, but there are some areas that are suggesting strengthen. And if you're in a position to comment on these now, fine. If not, a little later, I appreciate that. The first one is collaborate more with food services. I was trying to understand that one. What was the?
Well, and we've already started that process. We had a Head Start training day in February, and Kathy Walker came and presented to our staff. It was really a good session of seeking input from our teachers who are sitting around the table with students every day on meals, breakfast, and lunch, knowing their likes and dislikes. So we've already began that collaboration. Kathy is observing our food service program in all of our classrooms and sites and offering some suggestions. So it's just building the collaboration between the school district food service and the Head Start program. We have so many nutrition regulations involved in Head Start, and she's been just wonderful to work with, is really open to the suggestions of what children like and don't like, and willing to bring in some more healthier foods for us. So
Timeliness of family advocate staff, is there, as mentioned, again, if
Yes.
you're not in a position to answer now,
Mhm.
that's fine.
There's a Head Start federal requirement that we get physicals on all of our children within the first 90 days of school. So this year it was December 8th when all physicals were due. And our family advocate home visitor staff are the ones that work diligently on getting families to get those physicals in. We were missing some on that 90-day, and when I started asking the health manager that supervises that area why, we were finding out that it was the actual home visitor staff that were not doing their part in the entry, the data entry. So we've already began working with them on a stricter monitoring process. So, we always have families that we can't get to get those physicals in, and other than taking the children to the doctors ourselves, it's very, very difficult. But we're trying to minimize that, and our goal is to get 100% every year. But we did see some flaws in our own system with entering and training of the staff.
Obviously, none of these areas were major because we've been listed accordingly. And last one, if I may, watch EEN area, because EEN students are increasing in Head Start. I'm not sure what that means in terms of its increase, and I'm not sure what it means to watch it.
Well, yeah, we did, maybe it is phrased that way. We are required to enroll 10% of our 321 children identified with disabilities. So that would be 33 children, and we ended last year with 75. So we're over 20%, and as much as we have to ensure that we enroll 10%, we also have to watch the other end, that we're not over-enrolling children identified with disabilities. Or
Are
if
there
we
any
are, that
requirements that say you shouldn't have over a certain percent?
there is no regulation on that. We just have to ensure that we're, the support for the children and the students in the classroom is there, and we work collaboratively with Claudia and with her staff in the special ed department very successfully. We just,
Are these youngsters identified for EEN after they get in the program, or all these, the 70-some you're talking about, were they identified prior to entering the program?
prior, we start the year with about our 10% met. And then as the year begins, we identify many current Head Start students. We're a good source of Child Find, with it being their first experience in school. And we have a process that we go through as far as the pre-referral and referral process, and then of course the decision on placement. And we serve children in a lot of different capacities. We have 2 collaborative classrooms, one at the Howe Resource Center, one at Keller, and then we have therapists right on site in our classrooms, as well as the ECHO services.
I don't have a problem with that in child find. Obviously, in my mind, you don't want Head Start to become a special education program. That's not why it's there. I guess what I'm a little bit concerned about, and I guess I addressed this to Ms. Weaver Hendrickson, you always have to be concerned that when kids are identified a certain way, that stamps on them forever. And I hope we're able to do something to try to help them and get them out of special ed and not make that a career move. And most of these things here, I would have to believe were self-identified.
Absolutely.
Not by an auditor coming in. I appreciate you being straightforward and your staff being straightforward about it.
Yes.
And over half of those are speech only, so most of them are dismissed by the
Yes.
That'll be yours.
And I was going to add that as well, that the majority of them are speech. so-
Speech, okay, that makes
Yes.
more sense.
We're in alignment with the national trend as well. It's very common across nationally for Head Start programs to start with a lower percentage and then increase as the year goes on, as you're working with families and reaching out and providing the services that are needed early. Those early intervening services, I think, are really important and in alignment nationally.
Brenda?
This is just a minor point, but I'm curious, you mentioned that one of your goals in safe environments was to obtain a daytime custodian at the Head Start Learning Center. And elaborate a little bit on why you're looking at that.
Well, we have 200 children enrolled at the Head Start Learning Center, and we do not have a daytime custodian. So I currently have a clerical that, and with young children, there's a lot of bathroom accidents with 3-year-olds. And the teachers are, there has to be 2 adults with children at all times. So when there's an accident, we call upon the clerical. We have a wonderful evening custodian that covers both the Head Start Learning Center and the J-Doll on 3rd floor. And she changes the soap and the toilet paper, but with 200 little hands washing all day, we're also changing those things as well. So, we talked about a building paraprofessional even that could service our needs that way would really work as well. So, and the self-assessment is done by all of our staff. So we have committees and groups of people that go in and really will put it down. And I don't want to change things that they identify. And we have parents involved as well. So it is a self-identifying area of improvement.
Oh, makes sense.
Yeah.
Anything else? Hearing none, very well written report.
Thank you.
I appreciate your identifying all the
Absolutely.
acronyms.
Yes.
How I feel about that. And we will vote on this
All right.
next meeting.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Sally.
Thanks for your
Thank
time.
you.
Thank you. Our next discussion item is the Institute for the Fine Arts Task Force update and 5-year plan.
Well, in the essence of continuous improvement, about a year ago in the spring, we decided that it was time for us to kind of take a look at, step back and take a look at where are we headed with the Fine Arts Institute at East High School. What are the things that are happening that are in our current reality are going well? And as the program has grown, what are some things that we see maybe we're either trying to play catch up on or fill in some of the gaps and then to come up with a plan that we could really start to follow over the next 3 years was our initial thought. And when we got together and we did the work, we realized it might take about 5 because there's some work that we need to do. So what we're going to share with you tonight truly is not an all-inclusive, detailed, there's a lot of work that needs to happen behind the scenes with a variety of departments. But we wanted to give you an update and we wanted to kind of show you where we think we're headed in the next 5 years. So at the table, we have Karen Eichen, who is our historian at the table tonight. Karen has been a part of the Institute since its origin, and she's kind of here to answer any questions or provide input regarding where we were and where we've been. Jen obviously is a principal at Jackson, but also has oversight of district fine arts this year. She's starting to lead that for the district. And then Lucinda is the coordinator at East for the East Fine Arts Institute, and her job has grown, as you know, to kind of look at the Webster piece, the Washington piece, and East. And then also in the audience, if we could just raise your hand. We have some committee members, and if not committee members, folks that have joined us in and out of the year that we've been together. Some have come pretty regular, not missing a meeting. A few we had to bring in to get some help trying to figure out if we knew what we were talking about. So they may have joined us for a meeting or two and then went back. But everybody here tonight, if you could just stand and introduce yourselves, I think that'd be helpful.
That would be great for our viewing audience.
Yeah.
So, Lori, why don't you start us off?
Lori Burke, East High School principal.
I'm Nancy Schultz, principal at Webster Elementary.
Actually, I'm Michael Kennedy. My son is a graduate from East and loves music, and so I'm embracing the arts.
Tony Lardner's principal at Washington.
Carrie Green, and I'm a parent of 2 East High graduates, and I have a daughter who will be entering East High. I was the co-chair with Michael when he began the East High music drama appearance, and from that, many of the wonderful things that are happening at East High School, Washington, and Webster, that has come from that parental grassroots effort and those desires to see all kids be successful and have opportunities, because we know that our kids have the talent, they just need the opportunity.
My name is Luke Allman. I'm East and Washington choir teacher.
And I'm Connie Schrader. I have been East High student. I have 2 children at Washington, and I have a child at Webster. And we're all involved in musical endeavors. They all play more than one instrument, and they're very making sure that I'm involved. So,
On the back table.
I'm Lisa Green. I'm elementary curriculum coordinator. Lisa Johnson, curriculum coordinator.
And then
We have
he's
Ed
hiding
Dorff.
back there. Ed came to one of our meetings to make sure we had the history right.
If Karen's the matriarch, you can be the patriarch.
So Ed did join us and helped us kind of get started when we first got going to remind us of where we started. And tonight we're here to kind of let you know where we hope to be in 5 years. So we're going to give you just a brief overview. As you know, in 2011-12, the East Institute for the Fine Arts was opened. So we're 4 years. You also approved as a board the Webster Integrated Arts Program in 13-14, so we're currently in year 2. And as we moved through and started to look at current reality versus, where are things going, one of the pieces that I think you'll notice in the report is, what are we doing at Washington to kind of close that gap and make that bridge? So you'll see that in the report. As I mentioned, our committee, which started out as a task force, will move into an advisory group as we continue to go down the road. So we'll have some check-ins. We hope to bring some students on board to that advisory committee. Lucinda does a great job of communicating with our students and checking in with them, but we think it'd be good to have a voice on that advisory committee as we move forward. Our committee members included community, post-secondary, parents, staff throughout the district, both in music and not in music. We had some family and consumer ed teachers join us because we felt it was important to not only be talking about what do the music people think we should be doing, but what are others thinking that we're doing. We had administration at all 3 buildings, and then from our district, teaching and learning was present, as was Terry, was vigilant about coming to all of our meetings for the most part. So we had representation there. When we looked at kind of the current reality and where are we going, I would say that in general, we noticed 3 to 4 general areas that we need to do some work in. And some of this we've started already. Staffing. We need to provide staffing that allows more individual and small group instruction in instrumental and vocal at both the middle and the high school level. We need to have staffing that addresses the student support of the portfolios that we've started to have in both music and the visual arts. And we need to have staffing that addresses the new courses and the curriculum that's offered. So we spent a lot of time talking about, individual instruction, small group instruction, Washington, East, and through the budget and staffing process, we've been able to put in and build in some additional individual and small group time, particularly in orchestra. And this year, we're trying to make sure that we're becoming equitable in doing that in both vocal as well as instrumental band. So through a staffing process this year, I think we're able to get that done. The other work that we've noticed is that the portfolios are requiring a great deal of time on our teaching staff. So that's all of the work that the students are putting together over time, and someone needs to be meeting individually with those students and making sure they're on task and that the things are getting in there. So that's the other piece. The other is the course curriculum development with the teaching and learning department. When you look at the 5-year plan, you'll see that we need to start developing some coursework in the theater arts. Some of the feedback that we received from the post-secondary folks is that we need to start exposing our students in the 8th grade to some visual arts courses, and not just take the courses at the high school and bring them down to the 8th grade. But what they were encouraging us to do is, believe it or not, be wide and not so deep, and expose students in the 8th grade to all of the opportunities that they have in the visual arts. So we'll need to work together with the teaching and learning department to pull that together, because it would be a new course. And then also, we have had discussion about adding dance as a possible PE option, and adding that to our curriculum and our course options for students who are in the Fine Arts Institute. And that is, you can get physical education credit for dance, so that's an opportunity that we think we could be exploring as we add dance to the Institute. Also, the third would be the pathway continuum. And this is where I think we have most of our work to do. We need to figure out a way to be able to have students who have an interest in the fine arts get into that pathway and find themselves at the Institute. So we have the Webster Integrated Arts Program as a nice model of things that can and could be happening. But the committee feels that we need to explore the opportunity to probably expand that to some of our other elementary schools, and that not necessarily do they need to be in the East Quadrant. Students in other quadrants may want to have that exposure. Also, we need to do a structured feasibility study of what is the next best step at Washington. Is it to keep that nice pathway for kids to come in and go through? Is it to build a house concept at Washington where students are in a house for the fine arts? Or is it to look at an integrated fine arts approach where the whole building is exploring the fine arts and exposing students? So that's where we know we need to do some work, and we've got to do a feasibility study. We visited about that a lot at all of our meetings, and it was funny because when we got to cabinet, they had the same questions that we had at our task force. Well, pathway, house, what does that mean? What does that look like? So we think we need to take some time to do a real thorough study of what's the best thing to do at Washington. In the meantime, that doesn't mean that we stop what we're doing from Webster. We can continue to give those students the instruction in the small group and the large group and individual. We can use piano and violin like we do already. We have a piano lab at Washington, so we can continue to bring students through that. But we really think we need to spend some time studying that piece. And then also, we need to take a look at, and the committee will be happy that I'm saying this, I think, because we really struggled. Our goal was to do what we need to do to build the East Fine Arts Institute, and I kept telling our committee that, but there's a general sense, and we had folks on the committee that weren't in the East Quadrant representing music, because one of the challenges that we've encountered is, how do you remain equitable yet have something special? And I think that committee, it was I think I heard loud and clear that they would like us to spend some time as a district looking at what are we doing with the fine arts overall. How much are our students traveling? Our teachers traveling? What other opportunities are we providing in the other schools? So I just wanted to make sure that did come out in that task force. We wanted to also talk about the district, not just about what we're doing in that strand. And then finally, I would say the fourth thing that we're missing is, right now I would say we are missing a connection to the community. We have a wonderful support system through the East Arts Advisory that Mary's a part of, but we need to start making some connections with other post-secondary opportunities and other community to get involved. Similar to what we do with Baylink, similar to what we do with the lab. We're missing that component, whether it's St. Norbert's, UWGB, or Juilliard, so that our kids start to see where can they end up. And I was pretty pleased. We had Cheryl Grasso from UWGB. She hung with us as long as she possibly could. She was probably our most, she had the best attendance of our post-secondary community partners on the committee. But she gave us some really good insight. And I think we need to get them involved a little bit more and be a part of some of our discussions. So we laid out for you a 5-year plan. Hopefully when you look at that plan, you see that it flows. So for example, if we're developing a theater course in 15-16, you should see it being offered somewhere in the next year. And if you look at the things that we need to explore, you should see them coming to fruition. We went into 17 through 20 because, like I said, we started out with a 3-year plan, which grew to 5. But we kind of know there are some budget things that need to come into place. There are other things that might come in. And then we gave you some targets. For example, we would like to see dance added as a Phi-Ed option in 2018. So we would know if that's going to come to fruition. We need to back map and figure out when we need to start working with teaching and learning to start developing that course and that curriculum. So the specifics are in the chart. I kind of gave you an overview of what's reflected. The other piece that we know we need to do is start looking at our co-curricular offerings in the fine arts. Maybe providing a stipend for someone, or if you get a stipend, there are certain requirements that come with that. So for example, if you were to be an integrated elementary fine arts school, you have to have a show choir. You are required to do a musical, and all of those pieces that come along with building that culture and that climate. So that's my overview. I don't know if you have anything to add, or if we're going to leave it open for questions from that point forward.
I'll take questions. Brenda?
2 questions. At the very end of the report, you mentioned costs of about $500,000 over this 5-year plan. Are those all one-time costs, or are those some of them staffing that would be yearly costs?
Yep. We did the best we could with staffing, and we've got a couple little pieces to do on our planning worksheet, but we figured around $500,000 over the 5-year period. So extending out over those 5 years. So not $500,000 in 15, 16, and then another 5.
But is that $100,000 every year, or is it going to be?
It will be dependent upon what we're able. That was the hard part for us.
Okay.
So, for example, in staffing this year, we believe, if everything goes according to plan, that we will be able to allow for individual and small group instruction another period for each of those instructors, but that has a cost to it. So if that goes through the budget, we believe, we know what that cost is. If we sit down and look at staffing and we look at the budget process that we're in and we say, oh, you know what, we can only do that at the middle school this year and we'll do it at the high school next year, then that money has to shift over. So it was hard for us to put in an exact dollar amount every year. But if we were to get where we wanted to get within the 5 years.
But the staffing costs would go beyond the 5 years, though. Then it would be a continuous.
Yep.
So
I'm
that
just
was
talking
my-
about initial first costs.
Okay.
Right,
All right.
so that was my question, is
Yeah.
what of that $500,000, what is staffing costs that we will see in year 6 and 7 and 8?
Yeah.
And what is one-time piano lab or, you know,
Yeah,
things
pretty
like
much
that?
everything you see would be an initial cost. I mean, it's
A one-time,
A
yeah,
one-time?
a one-time
One-time
cost, because
cost.
for us to continue
it goes into
to
the
staff out, right,
budgeting, yeah, okay.
just like every other staffing
I would-
process that we
Right,
have.
okay,
And I think it's important to note if students are attending this class, they won't attend another class.
Correct.
So
Right.
it isn't an
Right.
additional
Although-
cost,
although-
unless you do the small lessons,
Right,
that's a little
right,
bit
yeah.
different. But
And that again, that 500 over 5 years, that is above what is currently budgeted for the institute.
Right.
That
Right.
remains intact.
right, yeah.
Yep. Yeah, we wanted to be able to give you at least an idea of,
Yeah,
as you roll out, you know, if you're gonna put in a black box room, there's costs to that.
right.
You know, it's pretty minimal, actually.
Yeah, really, the
But if you
500,000
look at-
sounded kind of modest.
Right, but if you look at the project planning document that we have all of those dollars
Okay.
into those areas. So,
And then, what kind of, I don't have in my head sort of what factors and what kinds of things are you going to look at with the feasibility study for Washington? What will go into that study?
Well, I think we would need to spend some time with Tony, who is the principal there. And I think we would have to sit down and look at how many students are coming in. If you have a house, which is what some of our committee preferred, there's a lot that goes with that. You know, are they in the house for just part of the day or all of the day? Do they continue to travel with each other every year that they're together? Is it more of a school within a school concept, like we started out with Da Vinci over at Langlade? So I think we would just have to explore all of the
What it looks
options and
like,
what are the
okay.
pros and cons that go with that.
Okay.
there are models of all.
Yep.
Okay.
Katie?
Mike?
Kim, can you give us some, I don't see any student numbers in here unless I missed them. Can you give us a rough idea, first of all, by school if possible, number of students involved in the fine arts now, and then what the projected number is after 5 years?
Well, I don't know if we can project out 5 years,
Okay.
because they really don't apply to the institute until they get into high school.
Okay,
But Lucinda was ready for that question.
Okay.
And has the numbers for you.
all right, great.
Sure. Right now, we have in the institute, total 34 students that are enrolled right now.
Okay,
24 are music majors, 8 are visual arts, and 2 are literary arts. So that's the high school. At Webster, we have 92 second through fifth grade students that are piano students, and we have 74 students that are violin students that are second through fifth grade students at Webster. And now, the fifth grade students that are graduating, we're having 16 graduated from piano and 13 from violin. And we've just finished today sizing violins for the incoming first graders, where there's a lot of them. So we have 25 incoming second graders going into piano and 37 going into violin. So that's very exciting. So estimated totals for Webster next year in piano are 101 students in piano and 98 in violin. So we're seeing a very consistent, very close, numbers in that regard. And then at Washington this year, we have 15 students. We started with 19, and several decided it wasn't, where their heart was at, and that some of them had other things in their classwork that just was more demanding, and with conversations with the parents, they chose to stop doing the piano program. But we have 15 that have continued since September, starting that and launching that at Washington. And we're estimating that 10 will continue from fifth grade next year that will be incoming sixth graders. So we'll have an estimated 10 in sixth grade. And then of those 15, about half, about 8, have said that they would like to continue with piano in seventh grade. And it's still a lab setting, a class setting, you know, so. But we're also starting to look to identify students that have more outstanding abilities, and our desire is to help provide more private lessons with them, whether we move them on to more of a master teacher if they are showing those abilities, or even with our teachers on campus, that they could maybe break out once a week for an extra 20 minutes to help refine some of the things they're working on. So we're seeing, on average, when you look at Webster, that typically it's 50 students per grade, but then you get these bumps. So like this incoming first grade going into second grade, it's a big group of students. So we'll have that bump every year coming along. So we might need a few more violins each year, and as they grow and sizes change, you know, so there'd be some shifting in that regard. But otherwise, you know, to project out that it would grow, we still have some room, you know, that we could add students on there. And I'd love it to be a real problem.
Okay.
So.
And this may be a question for Nancy. Are you seeing some open enrollment into your school because of this? And are you full?
Well, I typically give, right around this time of the year, I would say about between 7, 8 tours for incoming families, and I'm doing another one tomorrow night, and we're at 16. And of those 16, all but 3 specifically said it's for the arts program. And a byproduct of that is the family coming with. We are getting families where the parents are artists as well, either visual artists or musicians. And I see that as a real potential growth for our school. Our enrollment, Mike, you asked for next year?
Yep.
Overall?
Yep.
Based on our most recent staffing sheets, we're looking like we're pretty solid for all of our classes. There is some room in each one, but not very many slots. I think we're at, Terry, what about average of 22, about 22 if you go 1st through 5th, but it looks like we'll be at 24 in each of our kindergartens for next year, 3 kindergartens.
Where are these families from, Nancy?
There's a couple of them that are from our area. There's a family that just toured that dad lives in the Green Bay district, mom lives in West De Pere, and they're looking at our school. And then there's some others from, there's 2 families from the west side and 3 others from farther out in the Green Bay area, so it's good.
Are there some from outside the district?
Yeah.
There's a couple families from outside of the district where they have a parent in the Green Bay area public school
Somebody
district.
and the other parent
But
out.
typically, you know, one family, they were leaning toward West De Pere, and then after the tour, now, they were at our open house the other night and begging to know if they were going to get into Webster, so that's great.
Well, that's great news. Thank you, Nancy.
I think that's one of the reasons too that we need to be open to possibly looking at modeling the same integrated approach either on the other side of the river or at another school. You know, I think we've been able to do a lot of work, professional learning work, and work out the kinks and some of the things that you run into whenever you start something new. So, you know, we would work with Terry and Andrea and Ann to maybe identify that school if that's where we thought we could, you know, move next, and then.
What percentage of the incoming 6th grade class is actually, to Washington, is actually coming from Webster? Anyone?
Nancy, what's your 5th grade number right now?
Our
total
5th
students?
grade class is particularly small. I think we're at about 32 students going on from 5th to 6th, but 62 going from 1st to 2nd, so it's going to be nice change.
Okay, but that's gonna.
The ones that all go to Washington, I think that I have not heard of any of our current 5th grade families that are choosing to another school. One student has applied for Aldo Leopold, and in talking with Trina Lambert, she said that they're
But this would be 32 out of, Tony, how many in your 6th grade?
Around
Class.
100.
Okay, okay. So 10%, so we really, it makes it.
That's why you need another.
Yeah, we need more exposure at the elementary level.
And I think that's that's what I put on one of the gaps. You know, we have to start to think about, you know, how do you continue? First of all, I think we have to be prepared to serve those that are coming already.
Right.
You know, and I think we've got some things in place now for that regarding, you know, the piano lab and, you know, the time that the teachers can spend with the students coming in. But we have to make sure those 32 have somewhere to go, and then I think we have to start thinking about if we really want to meet the goal, which I heard originally was about 100 students and to have a waiting list. You know, we're going to have to be able to get students from more than just Webster. So.
Right.
And not all students will go to the Institute. They may come through and have great experience, and I still think we're going to provide a wonderful fine arts opportunity for them, even if they're not in the Institute. You know, but some of them will then go into the Institute, which is their main course of study.
Celestine?
Thanks. You know, on the district portion, there just isn't much filled in.
Nope.
So I'd like you to just talk about how you foresee for the next report filling that in. Because exploring the expansion of fifth grade band across the district, I think that's really important because you don't know where these next kids who are going to be interested in music are going to come from. They may not live near Washington or go to Washington. They may live on the far, they may live in, you know, for our school district. So the fact that that program had contracted a while ago, I just like to know first how you envision exploring that to expand that program. And then second, you know, in talking about this over the years, I've heard two different rationales. I've heard one rationale, which is to, and I think both are equally valid, which is to, you know, get kids to come and to get kids excited about music. The other rationale is that we have some students for whom music would be the thing to keep them tied to school. And so for my second issue, and then I have a third one once you get to those two, is how additional integrated arts elementary schools are going to serve both of those visions.
So the answer to your first question is that I'm not going to do that by myself. And this task force really, and we had to work hard to stay focused. You know, our focus was really around the East Institute and trying to make sure that the decisions that we make and the recommendations that we make are building that program, because that was our task. It's something that exists, and we believe that we need to make sure that we continue the promise that we made and find ways to do that. So to move to the next step really involves, in my opinion, more than my customized education lens. It needs to be the teaching and learning department, Mark Smith and his team of Mike Freeze and Nancy Chartier, who are helping with that piece. Because it's really about what we're doing district-wide, which I don't necessarily am not involved in all of those discussions and decisions. So I think our next step would be to bring, and that's part of the reason I'm excited about having Jen on point from a district perspective. We would bring Mark and his team and Jen and I and maybe some members of this group to sit down and say, what are those next steps? It took us a year to get to these steps from just the customized education lens, and now to get a look at that bigger piece is going to take more than just us. So that's my answer to that one. I'd like to share the wealth. So,
sure.
Thank you. You alluded to something I sort of had in my mind when you talked about the task force. My bias is the task force was set up for one thing. That's what you take care of, okay? And I certainly agree, and it's what Mr. Jeffries is leading to about doing more across the district, which requires another vehicle. And I think that's sort of what you're saying.
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
Yep. So there needs to be more work. I'm just not sure if it's not this group's responsibility to lead that work. I think there needs to be another group put together. So, yep.
Okay.
The other is, I think we've learned over time, and I wasn't part of the original, so this has been my challenge. I wasn't part of the original group to, explore and bring this forward. I've kind of jumped in after. I think that we've learned over time, and maybe Lucinda can talk to this and Karen more, is I do think there's room for both. I think there's room for a path of kids who are very interested and this is their future and their career and their ability. And then I think there's room for the kids that are just interested and it's something they really enjoy and want to participate in, and that we need to continue to offer opportunities. So I think what we've tried to do is look at that. You know, where do you have master teachers and lessons in the summer that are taught by master teachers for people who have the skill set? And then how are we also building, you know, a program where if I'm a student who really, really enjoys music, whether it's vocal or visual, fine arts in any way, they're also getting exposed to the opportunities that they could participate in. I know originally there was conversation about, you know, you have to attend East if you're going to be in the Institute. And we've started to have some conversation around, is that necessary? Or could you come to your home school in the morning and come over to East in the afternoon so that we're able to get kids? So I think there's a pathway for both. And I think part of exploring the pathway for everyone versus the Institute comes out of that other group who needs to do some work. But I think there's room for both at East. Michelle.
Michelle. Go ahead, Michelle. No, and just to add to that, I think that the piece that, as you look at an integrated arts program, particularly at elementary, even at middle school, it is an opportunity to teach children in different ways and different differentiation of instruction. And I've seen some having experienced some extraordinary results in terms of moving forward with special needs students when they're able to not only hear something verbally but see it done. And I've shared this before where I saw, well, this was actually middle school where they were doing parts of the cell, and each part of the cell was a puppet, and they each had a job, and they were going to work to do the things they were to do. And it was very successful, not only for special needs students to be able to link on to what this was really about in terms of the workings of the cell and what they would do, and Mr. Mitochondrion would do this and that. And the other piece of that, well, it was very successful for English language learners as well, because it afforded them different ways to learn and think. So I think that there are benefits well even beyond a student interested in the arts. It's for some kids, it's just novel. It's kind of fun. And so you see benefits that are in addition to, and yet if a child is not really into the arts, it's a way of being taught in an integrated approach that has been, you know, so it isn't that everyone's going to be an artist, but it creates a different kind of brain thinking to her. So it has real
I think one of the
benefits.
ways our task force was able to save some time is it's not difficult to find the research that shows you that involvement in the fine arts is beneficial in many, many ways. I mean, so sometimes when you start something, you have to dig and dig and dig. I mean, it's pretty evident. We didn't have to do a lot of research. It's all out there. I think our challenge is trying to find a way to coordinate both of those paths, you know, and yet also if I'm a student who's not interested in the arts, how do I fit into all of this? You know, and what does it mean for me if I'm at an integrated art school, and we've been accommodating that. You know, if there's a student that it's just not working for and the parents involved or the students struggling, we've been handling those cases individually. So I think, you know, we have to be careful not to force someone into something that they're not interested in either. But I think we've been able to find a good balance so far.
Mary.
Well, I have things all over the place, so I'll just start. Maybe we can follow up at another meeting. First of all, I really like to applaud the efforts of the task force. The breadth and scope of the folks on that committee is really extraordinary, and I'm always excited when the community at large is drawn into the conversation about where public education goes, whether it be in the fine arts or any discipline. So thank you to everyone who put in their time and so generously offered their input and their knowledge. I have a couple of things that I'm wondering about as you continue to make decisions about what's going to be housed where and what the curriculum is going to look like, etc. I've always been concerned, and I've shared some of this with Kim and with Mark, about curriculum in the fine arts. about assessment of what is being learned, and that the focus in music, I can only speak to music in this regard, that we are producing literacy in music. Because all of the rest of the magic doesn't happen in terms of student achievement and improved performance in academic areas if those musicians aren't literate, if they can't read music. I want to make sure that the experiences we offer children are not superficial. The arts can be exhilarating and fun and entertaining, but really it's an intellectual endeavor. And if they don't have that ability to read, by the time they get to middle school, it's almost, and I'm sure Karen sees this, at East High School, it's been one of the frustrations that we are getting children too late in the process. And even though children who show up at the gate at East wanting to get into the fine arts, if they don't have if they can't read music, they really can't fully participate in the experience. And the outcomes are not necessarily going to be positively affected. I want to make sure that as you go forward deciding at what level what is done, I know a lot of things can be driven by parent desire, but parent desire isn't always research-based. And that as you make decisions about at what level do we install a piano lab, we look at the research that says piano lab experience is most effective at the 3rd grade level for a 2-year curriculum with a class size of 4 students. Well, we aren't really doing any of that. Not that we have to adhere strictly to that, but I think we have to look at that research. And it should have an equal footing with parent desire and other factors that go into making those decisions. But I'm also concerned that there is a curriculum established at the elementary level that it's being addressed and assessed by someone who has the knowledge in the field. Okay, then.
And I think my only response to that is that's where we need help, because,
Yes.
We're looking at one lens and trying to make
Right.
sure we're doing this one lens, and it's a much bigger picture. So.
The other thing I'm concerned about is that we have a seamless and streamlined curriculum from elementary through high school. And I'm wondering about just the management of that, and whether you intend to bring in another fine arts coordinator for elementary. I mean, Lucinda's good, but she is one human. And as we expand, are we going to need other coordinators? And then how does that look? How is that relationship defined in terms of communication, so that we are streamlining the roadmap to the Institute? And it gets far more complex when, I'm not going to say if, but when we have other elementary schools on the other side of the Grand Canyon brought into the picture of fine arts.
And I think those are all the pieces. If you go back when I started, I said this is not a comprehensive, because we know we still have pieces to work and develop. This is a year's worth of work, and trying to lay out a general plan of, at least and Karen can maybe speak to this, because I think she's the one who said it feels so good to have a plan. It gives us a plan to follow, and then to go back and figure out details and
Sure.
what do you mean. So,
Sure. Then just another thing I was curious about in your presentation today, when you talk about the pathway and the Washington Middle School piece and the feasibility study, I think some of us who've been involved in this feel that's long overdue, that the cart was before the horse, right from the get-go. So how long do you see that process taking, the feasibility study, drawing conclusions and making decisions about what Washington is?
we have it highlighted in there as a 2-year process. So we would start probably now at some point, pulling that together, doing the study for the first part of next year, coming to the board with a recommendation, and then looking to implement down the road. And that's my best guess.
Yeah.
Mark Smith is a part of that conversation, Tony's a part of that conversation, but that's what we laid out. Our goal would be that probably at least by this time next year, we would have a pretty good idea of what that meant. And then we would need to come back to you, obviously, because there's gonna be things that come along with that from a staffing and budget perspective.
I just want to be clear that you know that a number of us are antsy.
Yeah, well, yeah, I know. You know, and I think that's been, you know, for getting this after things were up and running,
Yeah.
you know, I think it was a great start. And I, you know, we've had many conversations about when you don't have a plan yourself, someone's gonna put a plan together for you, and you're gonna end up having to go back and fill that plan in. And that's what I feel like we're trying to do here. You know, it's something great start at East, and as we look at it, you know, now we have to kind of backward map and figure out how do we get there. You know, and I think we had an opportunity at the elementary to start with something, and we know where that gap is. I just think we have to also make sure that we take our time and do it right. So I know we might be behind in some people's mind, but I don't think we want to rush and put something in place that isn't going to be successful. So,
Thank you.
Selston. So here was my third question, really. Correct me if I'm wrong, I don't see a lot of diversity in the group of people who put the plan together.
diversity in
Ethnic diversity.
Well, I think there were some invitations extended,
Okay,
and not everyone could come.
okay.
I think that those are the things that we need to talk about, not only just in who's on the committee, but who are we getting into the program in the classrooms, and who's participating. So I think we know that. Jennifer Higgs from the Equity Department was at a couple initial meetings, and had a role there, but wasn't able, you know, when you pick some dates, you gotta kind
Yeah.
of go with who can come.
Well, and she's just one person. I mean, you know, I don't know the parents I don't know that group of parents, although some parents were here. So that's one place to have more diversity. And, you know, here's the thing too. Music and theater and art is part of the human condition. And the way that we human beings express ourselves musically and theatrically and artistically varies depending on our culture. And if we don't have this built in from the beginning, I'm very concerned that we're going to be not only shutting people out who can express themselves that way given their culture, but also not teaching the white folks here about the various ways that we human beings express ourselves. So, you know, Jennifer's one person. Jennifer's great, but I think we definitely need to reach out to some more parents, especially. I know that especially in the East High Quadrant, around Washington, around Dan's, I know there are some parents who are interested. We have to find them. I think moving forward from what we had up till now, I understand totally what you're saying, but I'm just saying from my own perspective, we do have to speak very clearly. From my perspective, moving forward, we have to do a better job.
Yep, and I think, you know, I don't think that's gone unnoticed on our part, and I think it's all part of the details of how do you move forward. You know, and the efforts to really begin to look at this came from, you know, parents at Washington that are involved in the music. In fact, they're there tonight, some of them are involved with Kevin in the music club at Washington saying, hey, what's happening, we need to get going here. So those were our natural, let's get started on this. But I think, to me, when we look at feasibility study, that's where I think that we can start to really dig in and make sure that we're all encompassing and paying attention to those pieces. To me, we were going back and trying to fill in some of the gaps here that people saw missing, and looking at, you know, where are we going? But I think there's a ton of opportunity for that now that we have a plan in place. So, and there were some invitations extended, and we weren't able to
secure.
Yep. Chris?
I'm just going to piggyback on to what Ms. Shepherd said. I can appreciate it's hard to get a task force or groups going because it's hard to get people to make a long-term commitment to those efforts, and especially if you're working or have a family and other things. And I just thought of it now, something to think about perhaps is while you have this task force going or looking at whatever, you could have ad hoc groups that wouldn't be as long of a commitment, but you could still get people to sign on. I mean, something to think about.
Brenda.
A question about the expanding to other elementary schools. I mean, I think I like the idea of doing that. I have a concern with putting it in places that are far from Washington and East, only because if your committee is looking at how do we increase participation and make the fine arts, strand from Washington through East as strong as it can be, it feels like we potentially are diluting our efforts if we're putting the programs in elementary schools for whom Washington is not their middle school. And just because transportation pieces, and I guess and even if we were to solve the transportation, which I know you're working on, and potentially that wouldn't be an issue, even if we were to solve that, would those families take advantage of that and actually have their kids go to a school that's out of their neighborhood and away from their friends and things like that? Anyway, I guess I'm just expressing those concerns, and I'd like to have that sort of looked at sort of on, almost even at a feasibility, study level, because I don't want to, I mean, we don't have an endless pot of money, so we can't, it'd be great to provide these opportunities to all of our kids, but I don't want us to spend money that doesn't have a return that we're eventually trying to get to.
So I think, in my perspective, the value that I got out of having teachers on the committee that aren't in the East Quadrant is, the conversation around, we have very talented students as well. We have students that would possibly benefit from, the Washington piece, or when it's established, or the Institute at East. And because I live on that side of town, it makes it difficult for me to maybe get to that elementary, to come to Webster, if that's the only place. And then I think we have to think a little bit about how much room is at Webster, and how much room is on the east side. That's one of the things that I think we have to really also think about. And that's why I think our group was pretty anxious to identify schools and figure out who that was going to be and get moving. And again, you got a 5-year plan instead of a 3, because I was probably the one in the room saying, well, I think we need to slow down a little bit. We need to make sure we identify the right schools. We have to decide, are they in the quadrant and out of the quadrant, or some of both? Is there one in each quadrant? How do you make Washington middle school a middle school that any student who has an interest in music or the fine arts or the visual arts wants to come to? And if you lock in on only those schools that are in the East Quadrant, are we missing other students across the district? I think that's what we were trying to weigh out, and that's why we didn't make a decision. It's something we want to explore and spend our time, again, making sure we do right. I can tell you that in my conversations with Mark Smith, he's cautious to start anything new anywhere right now until we get universal instruction in all of our buildings squared away and up and running, and then how do you bring something on top of that? So I think we have to be patient, deliberate, and very thoughtful in what we do next.
Because the transportation, if they can't get to an East Quadrant elementary school, they're also going to have trouble getting to Washington because they don't live in the same. Anyway, I'm just a little. I would rather see us do what Mary's saying and really get our our overall district music curriculum so that it's the best it can be. And then we're at least giving all the students, you know, that ability to read music and those kinds of things, so that if they can come in then to a Washington program at 6th grade, can we create that bridge? Because we're not going to provide that to all of our elementary kids in the district. I mean, that's the frustrating part, but the piano labs and those kinds of things, but.
And you're talking about all the same things that we
Okay.
talked about. I think, you know, I think there's a discussion that needs to take place. You know, I don't know what the capacity is right now for teaching and learning to do a big study about
Right.
fine arts across the district. You know, and if that's a priority, then how do we do that? You know, and I think, you know, we might, as a committee, say that'd be great. We'd rather have you do that first because, you know, it does provide opportunity for kids. But I think really what I see in this is that if we truly want to build the East Fine Arts Institute, and you guys can speak up to this, to what we want it to be, it has to be more than just Webster.
Yeah.
Right.
It has to either be something we're doing district-wide that's going to get things going, or it has to be something that happens besides someplace, one place.
You know, if I could just weigh in for a second, one discussion that we really worked on was the notion of what if there was a house, and what would that look like? And, you know, we really came to the conclusion that we needed 3 elementary schools, because we saw, just based on the numbers of students that chose to go on with piano, that if there were on average 50 fifth grade students, that potentially 30 would want to go on into fine arts. So if that was the case, and they continued on, could we continue to build the institute at the high school with 30, and maybe by the time they get to high school, maybe 20 would want to continue? And the answer was no, we really couldn't. But if we added 2 more and we had 3, and let's say 30 students out of each came together, now you had 90 students, now we could do something. And we could see that continuing, so maybe you wouldn't get a full 90 going on to the high school, but maybe 70, maybe even just half, 45, but you'd still have a strong program that you could build that with. And if you had each year matriculating, you know, 40, 45 students, now you're over that 100, 120, you know, so that was just one thought. So.
If I could add, and having done some of this kind of work in a different area, one of the things that we saw was that as we added dance and theater, you created a much broader interest in kids as well. And I think one of the key things that during feasibility studies to really get a sense of what parents are thinking in all of our schools. Because I think that if we don't ask them, we won't know where that interest lies. And I think that what we also learn at our parent advisory is that parents often are not even aware of what opportunities are available to their students. Even though we have nights and we have other things going on, they don't always know. So I would want us to make sure that we're meeting the needs of our kids and our families in an inclusive way. And that's my caution with the house concept, is that you can track kids right through a system who never get involved with the other kids in the schools. And that I find worrisome. And it becomes difficult then, because what happens by 7th graders, there may well be some students who want to have Mr. Wagner in their class, and they can't because they're tracked into a track of fine arts kids. And then you can create an environment where kids don't want to stay in the program because they want to try something else they see over there. And middle school is supposed to be so exploratory and opportunities, you know, to avail kids too. So that would be my caution on that, but, you know, I leave that up to the group to look at. But I'd like to see parents surveyed across the district and looking a little deeper, just even an audit of our current programs from a parent perspective, in addition to the teacher perspectives, would I think be important.
Well, Jen and I had attended a conference in Denver this past October, And there was a school that we visited called Kunstmiller, and it was just recently expanded to K-12.
Integrated art school.
And they had different floors, you know, for elementary, middle, and high school. But they had different dance programs for different ages too. And they were a neighborhood school, and they had students from the neighborhood coming in to attend. But it was also a school that they could receive choice as well. And they said that, what was it that the one associate principal said about the neighborhood kids? That they came there because it was their neighborhood school, but that they found them not sleeping in as much as they thought they would, and that the integrated arts approach was drawing them in. So when you talk about that, Michelle, that it's just something that can be very appealing, you know, we got to see that as an example, and it was very interesting, and that it had greater engagement, greater attendance, you know, and those are all the benefits we know, you know, that studies bear out with the fine arts approach. So.
You know, I think the work that we do around customized education is, you know, when I look at Baylink and the Auto Lab, and it's pretty small. This is big.
This
You
is
know,
very big.
This is a really big piece. I feel like we were a small part of a really big piece, and there are others that need to come in and look at all of the other pieces. But there are many, 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 many things that you could be doing around fine arts. I mean, when you go to these conferences, and you know, we were in, you know, California looking at what it's amazing what's happening across the nation. And this is, you know, I think this is something that has potential to really grow and become very big. But I think that's why we're here tonight, because I don't want to get down a path 2 years from now and come back and, you know, have started some things. So we were looking for your feedback. We wanted you to know what the committee is thinking. We really feel like there are some really short-term things that we've been able to shore up and do through either staffing or curriculum. But the big pieces, I think, are still coming. You know, and, you know, Lucinda and Jen and the committee, and especially the people who have more of a musical background than I have been great to provide us, you know, I think with a lot of insights and research. And, you know, we're not just out there kind of grabbing things. We really want to make sure we're taking our time. But we also know we need to keep moving. So.
I think it's an interesting opportunity that you have before you, because you can't help but look at the entire, you can't help but nod your head to what's going on outside of this strand in order to feed it.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, you know, as Chris said, that's not the scope of the committee. I totally agree with what Mary said about music literacy.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that we need to attend to in our district. I am so happy that we have music and art and gym, physical education programs that we have, but, you know, everything we can do better. I have to tell you, I mean, I'm interested. I'm just not sure. I'm not sure where I sit about additional integrated arts elementary schools. I feel more confident about Washington. I feel more confident about, I'm not sure. Okay, so I'm looking forward to see what else you all come up with.
Yeah. Well, I think we're looking forward to hearing from you. You know, because again, our task was to look at how to develop and grow the institute. You know, that's really where our mindset was. But it didn't. It came in all the time. You know, and the committee is back here. Well, just what are we doing? But what is the district doing? What is the district doing?
Right.
You know, and we had teachers intentionally outside and the teacher said to me, I'm not sure if I am the best person to be on your committee, because I'm not sure how I feel about this pathway in this institute. And I said, you're exactly who we need on the committee.
Right.
And it was very insightful, and I think she provided, you know, and The other thing I think you need to know is we didn't do this in isolation. You know, Jen and Lucinda met with the district music people, the district art people. You know, they went out, they came back, they went out, they came back, they got feedback. You know, so we've tried to pay attention to the bigger picture. But at the same time, we have a small piece of that we have to look at growing and developing. But there is a bigger picture that needs to be looked at. And you know, I feel like I kind of keep beating that drum, you know, and I don't know what that means next. So, you know, I think the conversation with Mark, you know, we've had conversation with Mark. I think putting Jen on point has been very helpful, just even from a budget perspective of what are we providing to our classrooms and our instructors has been helpful.
Yeah.
And I think we've got room to grow on that, but you know, it'll be a big task.
Jeff.
I just wanted to add one other thing. I know that just in the elementary world, we are going through curriculum revisions, so to answer some of the questions that you have about the curriculum component, that is something that is going to be worked on in March. And then the other thing, you know, with all of the student learning objectives that have to be written, as far as what the teachers have to use, you know, just assessing of, you know, where their learning targets are and what their goals are. We are in the mix of writing common formative assessments, especially in music literacy, because we know that that is an area that really needs some help. So I know that our teams have been working on that throughout the grade levels.
Appreciate knowing that.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
we know that there's a lot of work that needs to be done, but they already have gotten a jump start on some of that progress already.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
So the great news is we've spent an hour talking about the fine arts.
Yeah.
You know, both district-wide and at East, and I think that's good. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
We're not done.
Oh, we're not done. Chris has to have the last word. Go ahead.
No.
I just want to pay Jen a compliment. We had a very good musical program at Preble High School, and much of it came from what she was doing at
Thank you.
I forget what school now.
I was at Martin.
Martin,
Yeah.
thank,
Yeah.
thank you.
okay.
And many of my other colleagues in the,
Well,
in the
too,
Preble
but I
area.
remember seeing your youngsters perform in
Thank
particular,
you.
and I just
I do appreciate that.
it has stuck with me through the years.
So, we know we have a lot of work to do yet. This is the overview. You know, if you have
Okay.
specific feedback that you want to share with myself or Lucinda or Jen or anyone on the committee, I think they can bring it forward.
When will we hear from you again?
When would you like to hear from us again?
You shouldn't ask me that question.
A monthly
When
agenda item.
is it appropriate for you to present to us again?
Well, I think there are some things that we're working to put in place right now from a staffing perspective. I think, we could come back this summer. I think we could start to lay out the parameters around the feasibility study around Washington.
Okay.
I think that's a priority to
Okay.
me almost more than looking at the other
right.
elementary schools.
That sounds good.
So that I see as immediate work, and if not, maybe the first part of the year, what are we going to do? So I think those things we could bring back to you. I think I need to connect with Mark about the teaching and learning piece from a district perspective and what his thoughts are there. But I think from this piece, we could definitely let you know where our numbers are at. We can talk to you about, what we're doing and how things are looking from a perspective of the feasibility study sometime this summer.
And actually, Jen, I'd be interested in hearing more about as you're developing the music curriculum at the elementary level, because I really think the exposure at the elementary level is
That's where you
going
have to get
to,
'em. Mhm.
that's where you have to
Yeah.
get them, and they'll be identified then, and that's where they're gonna pick up the skills, that's where they should be exposed to dance, and then let those kids kind of filter up and gravitate towards the fine arts, rather than, and I agree with Brenda in terms of if you're gonna just do some elementary, I'd be inclined to be closer, to get in the East Quadrant, and let those kids be exposed and have the opportunity. But a big factor there is a lot of the kids who are most successful in the Institute have access to private lessons. And a lot of our kids don't. And if there's a way that we can, try to beef that up at the elementary level, our after-school programs could be teaching dance rather than
Well,
just
that
a
is-
free-for-all in the gym or whatever.
That is the key, I think, at Webster right now in the piano and the violin pieces. Those are master educators that are working with our students on that skill development at a very early age. And not, you know, what I think happens is people then assume that our music teachers can't do that. But there is a difference in what you're trying to do with that pathway through the
But our
years.
teachers can help identify those kids.
Well, the intention with the group lessons was always, this is a tool to identify a gifted, motivated, disciplined child, and after 2 years, they would have the opportunity to filter into private lessons. And I know that's, we haven't gotten much farther with that idea, but I hope that that's still on the radar.
Yes, it is. You know, and I think to go back to your other approach, there are a lot of things that we can do district-wide by exposing students at an earlier age, 4th grade band, 5th grade band, you know, violin, piano. But when you look at the integrated arts approach, you're talking the whole school. And you have to have a whole staff that buys into that and is professionally learned. So to try to do that across the district, to be realistic, I think.
No,
would be
but
enough.
I think beefing up the music curriculum is a good start. The elementary level. Chris, oh, you have to have the last
promise
word.
this
Okay,
is the
go
last
ahead.
thing. Well,
No,
see,
I'm not gonna hold
quite
you
frankly,
to
you
it.
guys
Go
keep
ahead.
going on and it triggers other questions here, so I blame it all on my peers. And this may have been alluded to. I know as a district we have concerns, and we like to see and after-school programs that support what's going on in the schools. So if it hasn't been looked at, if there are any vehicles out there relative to the arts and finding some agency or agencies out there that could support that, you know, I would like to think that would be helpful. We can't do it all in the school. I mean, you got X amount of time for crying out loud. And
Right.
every time you do one thing, you take away from something else. So, you know, so anyway, if that could be thought about.
And I think that brings up a really good point, because the other thing we've been trying to be respectful of is the work that Mark is doing around scheduling with
Right.
Michael Reddig. Because there are many things that we think structurally this would work great for, but it has to align with the work that he's doing too. So that's another reason we kind of slowed things down, because as he gets more and more things in place with Michael Reddig, there may be a structure that allows for some of these pieces that we're trying to do. But I think you're spot on with trying to do things outside of the actual day, and I think that's where we're missing some pieces with our community partners.
Yeah,
Right.
that's exactly right.
That's exactly right. Well, if you go away with one message, you know that this board is very supportive of the arts.
Thank you.
In the schools.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, and Jen and Lucinda have done a ton of work
Yes.
behind the scenes for the committee.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
And
Thank
everyone
you.
who isn't
Again.
here, parents as well.
Karen, you haven't
for
said
coming.
anything.
Nobody asked me a question.
Good to go.
Katie, you might wanna
Chris,
ask
do you have a
the
question
parents
for Karen?
Yes, the parents.
Chris would like to know if the parents would like to say anything. These parents have never been shy before, Chris, so if they wanted to say something, believe me, they'd say it. Carrie took the bait, okay.
Well, for 15 years, the concern that I've had has always been that, and I've talked to Kim and our past two superintendents in regards to my concern, and that is we struggle with so many of the same issues in the arts over and over and over again. And the core of this is that there has never been a vision, there has never been quality control for the fine arts in our district. And, you know, we have athletic directors in all the buildings. And I was hopeful when the activity director assignments rolled out, but none of those activity directors had any qualifications in the fine arts. And so we've attended to and had leadership in that area, but we have never had leadership for any kind of vision for what the fine arts should look like across this district. And so, you know, Kim talks about, you know, the frustration of, well, you know, something started and now we have to fill in the gaps. Well, you know, Ed said, I am not waiting. My kids don't have 3 or 4 years to wait for a committee. I'm doing something now for my students now. And until we, and I don't know what Jen's complete function is going to be, but until there is someone that can oversee hiring to make sure we don't hire all instrumental people at the elementary level, so that when there's an opening in the middle school, we have someone that has expertise in the choral area to move them forward. You know, until we have quality control. So, you know, we know that all 3rd graders are learning to read notes, because in 4th grade they're going to play the recorder. And when you see the 3rd graders and the 4th graders playing the recorder, there's a sign screaming on their heads, hand me an instrument. You know, so, you know, when the 5th grade band program dissolved, you know, there's just, all of that translates into, okay, now what happens at the middle school? Well, there are, as I was at Webster with my children, I could see, you know, the less and less, and the link and the missing classes, and the times when summer school didn't, the communications for summer school opportunities were null, and it was a whole missing class for 4th and 5th grade band students. That translates to the musical, to the middle school, that obviously translates then to the high school. So until there is someone that oversees curriculum, that oversees hiring, that oversees quality control, which Mary's talking about, music literacy, until there is someone that devotes, and as the Institute grows, and as we've said, we need more leadership. There's no leadership to make these decisions. There's no leadership to have that vision. There's no leadership to move all of that forward. And so that's always been a missing piece for us. And so, you know, if there's frustration about the missing links, about, you know, the Institute, well, it's because, you know, we couldn't wait any longer. We had to do, something had to be done.
I don't think I didn't mean to portray there was frustration. I feel that there was, things got started, and I think I said, thank goodness they did, because here we are today. I think the frustration is around, how do you move it quick enough and fast enough, and how do you move it when there are a lot of other things that also need to be moved at the same time. So I don't want anyone to leave thinking that we were not happy things started and that we've been frustrated trying to fill in the gap. It's been great work. I think it's exciting work. I think it's exciting that we have gaps to fill. You know, so, but I think your point is well taken around who's on point to try to make sure that things continue to move forward. That's difficult when you're trying to do a lot of other things besides just the fine arts. So.
Okay, and I guess from my perspective, it's been great being on this committee. I've always enjoyed my involvement with the Green Bay Area Public School System, because I've watched my son go to these feeder schools. I mean, he was at Webster and he was allowed to develop and excel. He went to Washington when our neighbors decided to opt out to another school. He decided to stay, and he had a wonderful experience there. From there, his experience at East was exemplary. I mean, he ended up being valedictorian. He was extremely involved in math and music, where he went to UW-Madison and graduated with that. He's now a successful actuary in Madison, as well as a musician.
Go ahead, Michael. He's released his CD, or we'll be doing it. His album is coming out.
Thank you for saying that. Seriously, tomorrow he will be going online his first album. So he has maintained his music style as well. And we'll tell you about that later.
All right.
What I do want to say, because it's just, again, a general thought with regard to the importance of the arts, and the fact that he was a math and music major, it obviously paid off. This is a quote from him that was, he said, "The incredible teachers and learning environment at East helped him achieve his maximum potential." He says, "I was able to immerse myself in artistic endeavors while simultaneously engaging in heavy academic fare. East provided me with an excellent, well-rounded education, preparing me to enter college with confidence and with a focused work ethic." And I think that's where you have to look at the arts. It is not just fluffy, light stuff. It helps people become, they develop they become more engaged. Their brains are becoming, utilizing more of the little synapses that are going back and forth. You can apply a lot of the discipline that is required of the arts and apply it to your academics, and thus eventually apply it to your future career. And so my final thoughts again are that I'm going to remain as a community member being involved with this because I see the importance of the arts. And I think that as long as we continue with this forward process of appreciating that, we're not going to let it die. We're going to take it to the next level. And Ms. Jeffries, one of the things that I agree we need to do is some kind of a survey of parents. Because if you look at the quadrant of East Washington, in that area, it's very diverse. And one of the great ways of bringing people and involving people are utilizing the arts. So I think that if in fact the next tack is to do some kind of a survey, I think that we'll get out of that survey the fact that there's yet another vehicle for our kids to be involved.
Can I have one more?
You may have the next last word. Yes.
How many curtain calls have we taken here?
But I haven't
Where's the
taken
hook?
any yet.
That's
I want to thank all of you. I think, and I've you know, as especially Kim, who has stepped in and stepped up, and Jen, and I look at this leadership team. We are moving forward. We're going slow to go fast. I know that having said a lot about the arts myself, I'm a huge proponent, and it's hard to make sure that we have everything balanced. And I think, Kim, that's what I would offer, that I think you were trying to say in terms of how we do that. But it is obviously something, an agenda the board set out to do. And we're moving it forward, and I think that the updates will support the work that is currently being done and help the efforts moving forward. I too have children who have been totally involved, and I myself was, and it really made me an awesome math student. So, not really, but
in your mind.
In my mind, but it is very critical, and it really goes back to educating the whole child. It really is about educating the whole child and not locking into just one area of math and literacy. Every child should have opportunities, and I think that that's, when I look at the passion and hear the passion, I appreciate and respect that, and looking forward to seeing where the next steps go. It's exciting times.
And I think since we've exceeded our 15-minute allotment,
Yes.
an hour and 15 minutes.
But
We
it's even
intentionally
better.
kept the agenda short tonight.
Yeah.
Good forethought.
It's exciting.
Anything else? Any other last words? And I'm not even going to make eye contact with you, Chris. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you.
Sandy, are there bottles of water in the conference room in that closet? Oh, no, I don't think I want a cold one.
You have one more, Kate.
We have one more privacy in locker rooms policy. Please feel free to stay. Don't rush off.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
All right, we know how to clear a room.
There are lockers for music.
There are lockers for music.
There are.
Okay, that's me. And I'm
All
going
right.
to predict this will be much shorter than the previous discussion.
All right.
Let's hope so.
Under state law, we are required to have a policy on affording privacy in our locker rooms. And as the introductory memo articulated for you, the policy needs to address 4 things, and I won't read those to you. You had those in the memo. The proposed policy meets the needs of the requirements of the law, as well as addresses some of the needs from the Wisconsin Interscholastic Athletics Association. Katie, that's the WIAA.
Thank you very
You're
much.
welcome. Regarding media and media in the locker rooms. We brought this policy to cabinet, as well as Kim and Mark took a close look at it from a secondary and activity and athletics level, And then Kim presented the policy to the activities and athletic directors. They requested, as part of the policy, that there would be no cell phone use at all in the locker rooms to make sure that would be clear to the students. And so the policy includes that in it. It's not required by the law, but that was a request from the athletic and activities director.
That makes sense.
And that's it.
Any questions or concerns about this? Brenda?
I'm just,
what don't you
I'm
get?
just curious. I assume that we have had rules in place before this policy was written for some of what is here, like no cell phones in locker rooms, or?
I can't speak to
Oh,
that. I
okay.
don't know.
Anything that rose to the level of policy?
Our privacy policy on use of cell phones
right.
does
Yeah.
address
Yeah, it does.
use of cell phones in locker rooms.
Yeah, okay,
And
I thought so.
does
Right.
include a provision about not taking photographs.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thanks.
I think there was some inconsistencies probably that I'm hoping this will also
Yeah.
bring consistency to. I think the other piece we need to make sure though is that we're communicating and having proper signage to go along with it. That was the other request from the activity directors.
Are we experiencing any problems that you're aware of?
I am aware from a law enforcement perspective that we do have, I don't know the amount, I think it's minimal, but we do have thefts occurring in our locker rooms from students who are not supposed to be there, and I think Barb could probably speak to that a little bit more. And so we've been working with law enforcement as far as posting notices about no trespassing in the locker rooms so that we're able to have some law enforcement action when students are in the locker rooms with no legitimate reason to be there. Where this typically happens is that the locker room could be left unsecured during a game or a practice, and students who are not involved in those activities are going in the locker rooms.
Are the lockers
In
locked?
this policy in particular, Chris? Yes.
Yeah.
We have had situations where I would say there has been misuse of an electronic device in the locker rooms.
My experience with theft in locker rooms, a large percentage were because kids didn't lock their lockers. You know? Or they'd put the lock up, but not
And they
engage it.
snap
You
it,
know?
right.
So you just walk through and boom, you know.
Or we have visiting teams that use our lockers.
That's right.
Yeah,
Have
and-
borrowed some of our items.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I know it seems very simple to say you're going to be able to monitor all that, but it's extremely difficult. I mean, your best hope is, right now, I'm assuming all the schools have it, at least have, you can't have monitors inside the locker rooms, of course, but you can have it in the doors going in and out, so after the fact, you can help identify someone. But well, whatever.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, we'll move that forward. Thank you, Melissa. And that concludes our work session.
All right, thank you, Katie. And we'll move to our organizational support work session. I will ask Chris to facilitate that part of the agenda, if you would.
Thank you, be right there since I get to that. Alan, do you have anything? I don't see anything here. Anything you'd like to comment on? We have opportunity. Okay. We have quite a bit in the human resources area, and some of it, especially if we get the insurance, is rather complicated. I know I'll be explained well.
Okay.
So with that, turn it over to
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Marsh.
The first item is the employee handbook updates, and what we've done is, these are changes that apply throughout the document. So what we've done is listed for you the page references, starting with the first one, and gave you a copy of the handbook with the changes, and then a handbook copy that would show it how the document would read if the changes were to be approved. most of the changes are clarification of language, because now that we've had the handbook for about 2 years, we find that when people read the handbook and the policies, there's things that they don't quite understand, and we've attributed some of these things to the way we've got the handbook set up, and so some of these are those modifications. So Randy's going to step you through each one of them and give you a chance to ask any questions before we move on, and then hopefully if there's any questions that we can't answer, we'll bring them back to you before the next meeting.
Good evening. Just to show you how fast time flies, we'll be at 3 years on the handbook on July 1st already of this year. It's hard to believe it's been that long since we actually opened up the first copy that we have. As Jean had said, I'm going to walk through just briefly each of the sections where there were some changes made and then ask if you have any questions and then move on to the next. The first one is on pages 17 through 19, and this is an area the board took action late last year in adding language on student bullying, and we felt it was appropriate that we bring this language into our handbook to apply to the employees as well. So what you're seeing is the discrimination and harassment section now including and adding language around bullying. Are there any questions that people have after looking through this? Okay. All right, hearing none, the second one moves into on page 20. It falls under the original
Could you give
attendance.
us just a moment to get to the pages, Randy?
Sure. We'll go to page 20 now.
There it is. There it is. Yep.
Okay. Underneath the attendance policy, we've changed some layer, added some language that now addresses what happens when an employee simply stops showing up for work for a period of time. We would make every effort to contact the employee, looking out for the well-being first to see if there's anything that is wrong. But after a period of 3 days with no reports into the absence system, inability to contact that person, we added language here that would allow us the opportunity to separate employment if that was necessary. We have employees that come and start with some of our positions, for instance, like a noon hour supervisor position, and after a week or two, they just decide they don't want to come back to work anymore. And they may not return. We had some paraprofessional that did the same thing, was gone for 2 to 3 weeks at a time, and we just felt it was necessary to have some language to allow us that opportunity without having to go through the full process for attendance and failure to show for work.
Chris? I mean, the only concern I would have here is if someone lives alone, seriously ill, can't get to the phone. I mean, what would we do in a situation like that?
The situation I was referring to, we had a paraprofessional that just stopped showing up for work. I spent a couple of weeks, in fact, trying to contact that person, making phone calls, leaving messages, sending letters until I finally was able to reach that employee. We didn't make a decision until we had an opportunity to find that employee. I think the employee's well-being comes first. I mean, we would be very concerned that if an employee doesn't show up for work for 1 day, we should be trying to find out why that person's not here after 1 day. We get calls all the time asking if an employee put an absence in and they don't know where they are, and then they show up late. They hadn't notified the supervisor they're coming in late. So yeah, absolutely, we would look out for the well-being of the employee first.
In certain cases, we would probably, if somebody is regularly here at a certain time and you know they live alone, or that, maybe they're traveling a distance, we've called 911 sometimes when somebody
Yeah, I guess that would be, if say you have a very dependable employee and also they're not there.
Right.
There might be something more serious going on, and I would hope that we would have some flexibility in a situation like that.
That's why we put in here that we will verify the well-being of the employee,
Okay.
but there are sometimes when an employee makes it known that they don't like the job and maybe they're not going to come back, and
Yeah, I mean, if they
it's
just
pretty
don't
easy
want
to
to show up,
distinguish
then
the
I
two.
can see why
Yeah.
we wouldn't keep them on the payroll.
But as it reads, though, it says shall be considered to have voluntarily resigned.
And that's so that for unemployment, that we can say that that's our policy, that when they don't show up for work, they have voluntarily resigned. Because if it's not, and that means that if they then apply for unemployment, they will have been considered to have voluntarily resigned and they wouldn't qualify.
Okay, but this doesn't make it automatic so that the person in the scenario that Mike just presented.
No, that's because we don't write all the different scenarios or the steps we would go through in a policy like this to say we would do these things first. You would just know that we would do our due diligence to make sure that we've attempted to call the employee. You know, it's a, you know, we would be looking out for the well-being of our employee first. And if an employee regularly shows up and doesn't come to work, your first inclination is what's wrong, what's happened. But after you can't, you know, and
Yeah, someone has fallen and can't get to the phone, let alone, you know.
we had a situation where somebody was known to be going out of state. And I think the supervisor had an inkling that this person may not be coming back, but we had nothing in writing. So, was that the one you
Yep,
mentioned?
yep, that was the one.
Kept trying to find them.
Yes. And we really, our hands were tied, so we're holding the position and not being able to reach this individual. And we were quite sure that the person wasn't going to come back. And this would allow us to issue a letter saying that you're considered resigned.
I don't know if you're quite hospital or not. Where I was, always had contact sheets. Everyone had emergency sheet to fill out whom to contact if
We do that,
something
and
happened.
we keep that in our HRI information system. Plus also if it's a building or a department, we call the department to ask them if they have any other numbers on that person, because sometimes they get changed in the department or the school and we don't know that yet, so we always
Well, I
make
would
sure.
think the building or location would be calling before you, if somebody doesn't show up.
They
That
they
makes
do,
sense.
but if the absence is continuous, then it defaults to human resources.
Okay, no other questions. Then with the next section, we go on to page 33. Is everybody there?
Just type the number in the top,
I was supposed to just,
where it says, well, no, see where it says 33 out of 73?
got it.
If you just type the page and click
Instead
enter,
of
it
just
takes you right there.
spinning it
Instead of
fast forward until I
spinning.
see red. Right.
In this section, under new employee orientation, you can see we're simply striking out language that no longer exists and replacing it with the appropriate language. We continue to look for these types of things in the handbook all the time, and they just seem to pop up once in a while, and we didn't realize we hadn't caught it before. Next, we'll go to page 41.
I'm there.
In this section, there's a lot more to talk through here, just real quickly. What we did is we recognized in the handbook, in sections part 1, part 2, and part 3, there was language that was similar, saying the same thing for each of those sections, and we decided it was appropriate to bring them forward as much as you possibly could to have one section that applied to all employees. There are some pieces that stayed in the teacher section because they're specific to the teachers. So what you see here is first of all, in the heading is a change from leaves of absence to absence reasons, because this ties directly into ASOP. It's our absence system has these exact terms in there that we're using, and then we'll put a new link in that takes you right into the absence system. So an employee going out here wanting to enter some kind of an absence, they could type it directly into here. And then when you move into the second paragraph, they're striking out pieces in here that are not relevant, and then the red is the piece that is new language. We have a new form, is the non-family medical leave report form, which an employee who is going to be using in excess of 10 non-paid days in any school year needs to have written permission to use in excess of 10 non-paid days. And it doesn't have to be at one time, it could be intermittent. We just need to make sure that if there's a person who has a series of intermittent absences, that they might be qualified for FMLA. And we need to make sure that we're giving them the right documentation, that we're tracking it correctly, we're making sure they're getting the things that they want. But also, we don't want people who are working in a school calendar year to be taking excessive amounts of time off for non-paid. You know, they know when they're going to work. It's a regular calendar. They have scheduled breaks, but things do come up and people take time off. So this is just telling you that there's a new way of doing that and how you submit that to Human Resources. As you go forward, you'll see there's just a reference to the FMLA. On page 43, there's a clarification on the emergency leave, simply adding that these are paid days. It didn't state that, but it's always been practiced that emergency days off or paid time off. So we're adding that in for clarification. On the next page, under religious holiday leave, this again is paid, but it's not accumulating. This is a little different than personal leave. You get up to 2 days in a year, but you don't get to carry over and max them out the next year at 4 days or 6 days. This is just clarifying our practice there. Then under personal leave, this is an attempt. The language that was in there that struck out on the first piece here has been language that's been around for a long time. It was all contractual language. And new employees coming in, quite frankly, when they read that, didn't have a clue what personal leave meant. They couldn't figure out what it meant. So this was an attempt to change the way that personal leave reads, to tell a person that personal leave is tied directly to sick leave. You can take it off to extend a break in a holiday. You can carry it over up to one time, up to 2 days additional for 4 days in a year. And we're hoping that this language here that we have will let a person who's never used a personal leave day, that opened up the handbook, could read it and understand what personal leave meant and how it would be applied and how it would impact them. And then if you move to page 45, these are the pieces that were in the handbook originally that are being struck out because it was moved forward into the opening paragraph. Everything was kind of moved up in there to be summarizing a little bit better, and then any extra things in there that didn't apply anymore, how we're doing it, are taken out. On public association professional service leave, we're striking out association. There's a separate piece in the teacher's portion of the handbook in part 2 that talks about the union president, that the association president has time off, that's paid time off. And this is really more about working in the as a public elected official is what this was. So this is just clarifying that, and it's not paid. If you take off for a year to run for office, it's a non-paid leave. In child-rearing leave, we struck out the language in there that doesn't, it's language that is not really necessary. We don't tell an employee they have only 10 days that they can request a child-rearing leave after the birth of their child. Many people who are asking for child-rearing leave don't realize until the 10th, 11th week they're off with their child that maybe they really want to take off. The old language said you can't. You had to do it within 10 days or you don't get anything. And we haven't been applying that. We've been allowing people to apply at different times without the relationship to the 10 days. So this just takes that piece out. That is it. Now, if you go to page 53, it's still kind of tied into it. It's all still the same. This shows the pieces in part 2 that were struck out. And then ultimately in page 63, the pieces in part 3 that were struck out. Everything then tying back into the newly created section. Awful lot to bite off there, but any questions about the rationale on why we want to do that, or explanations?
Really, the only thing, other than clarifying language, the only thing of substance in there one could argue is the 3-day, and you're considered resigned from everything you present here. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
Okay. It is, but it's something we have to have because the issue does happen where somebody just doesn't show up, and so we have to have some sort of guideline as to when we can, consider that even though we can't reach them, we can issue that they're resigned, that they're considered to have resigned. So that it changes. It doesn't really change our practice, but it allows us to do something that's very reasonable.
If you go to, I'm trying to find it before I ask the question. 67, page 67,
20.
68. It's not about changes you've made, but something here that I guess I didn't pick up on.
68, you said?
67 and 68.
Is that, Kristen, is that what you have up there now, 67 and 68? 67? Okay.
Just looking at the vacation schedule.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I'm not looking for a response because it's here, but I mean, I say we go beyond 20 days. I mean, 16 years, 22, 20 years, 25, 25 years, 30 vacation days. we're not in France, so I'm just sort of wondering about that, maybe something to think about here. Also, if people are eligible for payout, that's a lot of money to be paying out at the end here. So I guess my thoughts, maybe we would want to look at that down the road here in terms of maybe well, I won't say what we should do with it, but it just seems excessive. I don't know what it is in the community, what the standards are in the community. That's what I guess I would first work off. But that's,
just take
again,
a,
I'm
take
not
a,
asking for comment, I'm just throwing
just
that
take
out
a look
there.
at that. Okay.
Yeah, I've looked at it and compared to the county and the city, and I have, I'm prepared to share that with you at some time in the future if you'd like to visit that.
Okay, and maybe you can speak with the superintendent a little bit further about it if it's deemed worthy to come forward to make some changes.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Well, so, thank you. Yes, it is. You mentioned 3 years. My gosh.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping our staff are becoming comfortable with this process in the handbook. So yeah, quite a bit here on insurance, and I always find that to be an interesting area to try to walk through. But I have every faith in Mrs. Marsh that she'll use the KISS method for me, and we'll move on.
All right, we'll try that. It's always a challenge to keep insurance things simplified because insurance isn't simple. It's complicated and it's very important to people. But I think that some of the changes that we're recommending are reasonable and should be considered. So what I'd like to do is just go through them section by section, and I know you've read this, but I'll give you the highlights, and then if you have any questions, we have a couple of weeks to get the questions answered and bring them back to you. And then I'm not certain which areas would need to be brought forward for the board vote. I know that the increase to the premium rates definitely would be, but there might be other things where you might feel comfortable just saying proceed because the change isn't really dramatic and it's not really a huge change. But the first recommended change is to look at an increase in 2% for overall medical premium rates. Last year, because we restructured the plan, we added 2 additional plans, and we went to a new third-party administrator, UMR. We didn't increase the rates. But this year, looking at, as a recommendation from M3, we aren't changing the structure of the plans, but we are recommending a 2% increase. Now, Cindy Van Asten informed me that when you look at inflation and our current utilization, the 2%, and actually the number that she gave us is slightly above 2%, but we're saying keep it at 2%. That would be the rate increase. And what we presented to you on the charts that were attached are the current rates and then the new rates. And so this would be our recommendation. Are there any, we think it's a modest increase. And in talking with employees, I think it's easier to understand this is the amount of money I'm now going to have to budget rather than to make a lot of structural changes in a plan and then they have to figure out, well, how are those changes going to affect me financially when you change co-pays and deductibles and things like that. So we're not making those changes. Then again, the employee pays 12% of the premiums if they go through the personal health assessment and 5% more, 17% if they don't. Any questions about that? Then the next recommendation, last year we set up a $1,500 high deductible health plan with a health reimbursement account. The district funds that account at $1,250 for single and $2,250 for a family. And the idea behind that is that if those dollars aren't used, they roll over and can continue to roll over. This last year, we told our employees that we would roll over the full amount if they didn't use it, or if they used a portion of it, the balance would roll over to the next year. Typically, companies don't roll over the maximum amount every year, but they reduce that. And some companies don't roll over anything. It's there if you use it. If you don't, you get another
amount the next year, and those amount can change. We're recommending to keep the current funding amount the same for 2015-16, but that the rollover would be $1,000 for the single and $2,000 for family if those dollars weren't used. Any questions about that?
Questions?
We are also recommending that we continue the current incentives for the wellness for for taking for wellness activities, and those dollars would help fund the health HRA. And so we just feel that that's people, when you have an HRA, these activities are things that you do offer to employees to help them stay well and to provide them the opportunity to get additional dollars in the HRA. So we are recommending that we continue that.
You mentioned about, in essence, we're trying to herd people to stay healthy because it's not only good for them, it's good for the organization, it's good for the kids to have consistency.
Mm-hmm.
There was an, I'm digressing just a hair, but there's an article in the paper the other day about KI on digression. What KI has pushed through the years, it seems like they're way ahead of the curve on employee wellness. Are we in a situation where we're comparable to what KI is doing, be that good or bad? I mean, at least the article there sounds like they're doing a bang-up job. And are we at that point or heading that way? Or
we're just starting, and I think that companies like KI have been kind of at the forefront. They're really pace trendsetters when it comes to wellness activities, and I think that we would like to further our progress in terms of wellness, but I think there's a progression you have to go through, and I think companies such as KI would tell you that they moved incrementally in that direction, and I think that's what we are trying to do as well. And the first is to set up this sharing of the risk actually with employees. When you have an HRA, you think a little bit, and I have one, so I know what I'm talking about. You think about where you're going to go for your care, and you try to think about how do you get the additional dollars, make sure you get your health exam, and those are the things we're trying to get people to do. And we know that initially we had not a huge number of people participating in that plan, but now that we've had we have a little over 6 months of data, but now when we have a full year and people get used to the idea, we hope that more people will enter the plan. And that will help, I think, in the journey towards greater wellness.
Yeah, but it's, these are like you said, these are complicated issues.
Yep.
And it's very difficult to know what hospitals actually charge,
Mm-hmm.
what doctors actually charge. And so healthcare consumers can't really be consumers because you can't go on your phone. I can't find the 15, 50-inch Vizio TVs in the area and which one's the cheapest. You can't do that right now for healthcare. And, KI is interesting. From where I sit, I'm not sure that that's a model I would want to emulate, just because I think that they have some different rates for depending on what your health screening outcomes are.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, from where I sit, that's not quite, I think, right.
That's the philosophical decision that has to be made. You have to understand what your goals are.
Right. Now, the city, when I first came here to the school district, the city had saved money by basically investing in what we have downstairs.
The clinic.
Yeah. I don't know, I can't remember if they had a full clinic, but they did have a nurse come twice a week or once a week.
Yes.
And that actually improved actually the health care, the health outcomes of the city employees. And so that seems to be, we've already taken that step, and I know that I've heard people talk about the clinic downstairs and how much they like it. So I think that, well, I think it's clearly a journey. And as our healthcare in the United States improves and as there's more information, we'll have more information. So I think that's interesting. You know, parenthetically, I was out at Bayport. I had actually texted Katie a picture. I wonder, do they have a clinic on school grounds at Bayport?
You know, I don't know if they do.
I have
There's a sign.
There's a
It says
sign.
Bell Outreach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's connected, if that's just there, or if that's connected with the school. But since we're talking about healthcare, I mean, I know this is for our staff members, our employees, and not for our students. But I think that's the next frontier.
One of the things we want to do is to, you know, if you need to access healthcare, to access that healthcare in the most cost-effective manner. And it's generally a clinic such as we have, an urgent care clinic, or a, you know, sometimes there's clinics associated with some of the retailers, and those clinics are less expensive than an appointment with a physician. Some companies are, requesting that their employees call a nurse triage and talk about the symptoms,
Right.
and then the nurse would recommend where you need to go. Because clearly, sometimes you end up going to the walk-in clinic and you maybe should be in the ER. So you have to, it's important to get access at the right place at the right time for the care you need.
Well, complicated. Yes?
Yeah, complicated.
I just had a comment. I know that Jean has been very aware, and people frequently call us to tell us about what opportunities are available. So I think that it's that open door to listen and learn. And I think so as we look forward, you know, I think that that's been very helpful to understand what others are doing, not only through M3, but other community partners have come and talked with us as well. So there's a lot of different things happening, and I think I really appreciate exploring what's out there and how to move forward in the best way we can for all involved too. I think that's, so thank you, Jean, for moving that.
The next item is a flexible spending account, a limited flexible spending account, and it took me a bit to get my head around what this was when Jennifer Vincent pointed it out to me. But we have some employees whose spouses have a health savings account at their employers. We don't know who they are, but IRS rules would say that if an employee's spouse has an HSA, health savings account, at their employer, they are not allowed to have a flexible spending account with Green Bay. And that's just an IRS rule. So what we'd like to establish for those employees is a limited flexible spending account so that they could use the FSA here for anything that's not medical. It's the medical expenses that if their spouse takes them with their employer who has a HSA, they can't do the medical expenses here, and they can't participate at all. So if we set up a limited FSA, it would benefit those employees. And again, because we don't know what plans spouses are on, we do know, however, that there are some employees whose spouses do have an HSA, and they would benefit by having a limited FSA for dental and other expenses. So this one is one that would be, I think, something that would be perceived positively, probably by a few people, but we feel we should do it for them. And the cost would be minimal for us to do it. It's a matter of just setting it up and managing it in HR. So, it's one of those little IRS rules that we are mindful of.
Well, I'm glad you picked up on it, and that'll be helpful to our employees.
Well, these are things that, you know, M3, our partner, helps us keep abreast of, so that when we need to make these changes, they inform us, and then they help us make them and how to monitor them. Wellness activities, we've kind of summarized some of the, you know, the wellness and the personal health assessment. We had a really, really high participation rate of 99% of our employees. I was surprised. We'd like to continue this. It's part of our agreement with Bellin. Again, just to reiterate, the employees' PHAs are free, but their spouses we do pay for. We want to continue offering the same 5% premium savings for those who participate, but the one difference is that we'd like to require that the employee, when they sign up in open enrollment, that they indicate at that point if they're going to participate or not. Because it's extremely time-consuming if an employee tells us they're not going to participate, and then they do, and then we have to adjust the premium rates. It's very time-consuming. So we feel that now that people have experienced it and the participation rate is good, we'll have a lot of people feel comfortable signing up at the time that they take it. But we will not go back and adjust rates if they say no and then they decide to do it.
Questions? Thank you.
And then regarding the dependent eligibility audit, we'd like to go back and actually take an intermediate step before we go full force into this. We think that at some point it might be a good idea, but at this point I'd like to recommend not moving forward with this, because there's an intermediate step that we'd like to talk about first. And when we have those details worked out, I would bring that forward.
Will that be in 2 weeks? Or?
I think it might take a little bit longer than 2 weeks. I don't think it would involve a major change in process that the board would have to vote on, but it would be something that I'd want you to be aware of. And we'd have to have good communication with our employees. Then the dental, this one is also a benefit to the employees. There's a program that Delta Dental, our provider, offers called Checkup Plus, and basically it is that if the employee has their annual, preventative checkups, those costs for the checkups don't go to their annual maximum. So it really, it's done because we know that the preventative checkups, the teeth cleanings, really pay off in a healthier oral hygiene, and we want to incent people to get them. So it's just a program that we would sign up for with Delta, and it's a way that the employee it doesn't go to the individual maximum. So they really then have more dollars if they need more extensive oral care. And then the last.
Not as exciting as fine arts, is it, folks? But equally
it's
as
really
important.
hard to make it exciting.
I have no compulsion to have the
I'm
last
looking over here, you
word.
guys are.
You could play a little musical interlude between
Right.
each of these items.
She can sing.
Wow,
Get
that would
glazed
actually
over
make that
insurance
help us
discussion.
remember it better,
I know.
right?
Yeah.
The document that you saw that was called AAA Metrics is really just to give you some information about the health plan, how it's doing, and then just a few comparables that you can see. I won't go through it, but I just point out that again, our personal health assessment, we shared this out. In the middle section, you can see that 99% of employees completed the personal health assessment. Their aggregate score, this is on a score of 0 to 100, was 77.6, and the national norm is 70.6. So our workforce came out very well, according to Bellin. I mean, and it was a very good thing to see. Only 16% were at high risk, which is higher than the national norm, however. 3 to 5 were at 3 to 5. The moderate risk is 3 to 5, and that was 43.8%, higher than the national norm. And then low risk was 40%, which is lower than the national norm. So we really we have work to do. The overall aggregate score was higher, but we still have employees who have some higher risks that we want to work on.
I'd say we have a lot of work to do in that area.
Yeah.
With our employees. I had a question about that particular one. When I see that at moderate risk we're not
high.
quite twice the national average, and high risk 80% more, 60% more, and I mean low risk we're less than we should be. I hope this information gets out to employees so they
did, yeah. And
thinking about it.
There are ways that if the board would like us to explore, there are ways to reach out to people who are at high risk. The thing is, we've messaged to employees that we are not going to be sharing any of this information. But in order to reach out to people, you would have to share this information with another party who would then contact employees who are at higher risk. Now, our benefit advisory group was supportive of us sending out letters, and Belen agreed to do this, to those people who are at really high risk, to inform them, and it's not done, the data is not shared with us, but to inform them that, we suggest you see your doctor because this is, such as things that with cholesterol is extremely high. Certain risk factors would put them at imminent danger, and we said, yes, do that. And our group was supportive of it. But there's that moderate to high risk group that if we want to reach out, we couldn't say that we are not sharing the data, because we would be sharing it and then they would be contacted. So if we want to do that, it would be another discussion item. I was uncomfortable going to that route because we've been saying we're not sharing this data.
Right, yeah. Right.
And,
This is the first year this has been done.
This is, I think that this had been done in the past, but I think it was quite a few years ago. I don't recall. And
well, then this is the baseline for us in essence.
This is.
Hopefully, the first wave will knock it down a little bit by next time.
And then just interesting, the last section is when the percentage of wellness exams completed, that's the annual physical. 44% received their annual physical. So that's not the number. It's higher than the national norm, but it's not the number we'd like to see. We'd like that to be 100%, really, because that's really important. And then you can see that in terms of the claims, claims over $50,000, we had 9.6% of our and when we say members, we don't say employees because this is all people covered. So that's why the word member is used. But you can see that the almost 41% had moderate claims of $5,000 to almost $25,000. That's what the biggest bulk of the claims is.
Any questions, concerns?
I'd also like to point out that we are now paying in for the Affordable Care Act. And the Affordable Care Act expenses that are listed here, which is almost $400,000. I have to check with Cindy Van Asten to know if that's year-to-date or if that's annualized. But we do have to pay in to help fund the Affordable Care Act as a district. So I wanted us to know that. Plus, there's going to be a tremendous amount of record keeping necessary to monitor and submit to the government some
well, if we didn't
reports.
have computers, you'd have roomfuls of people, wouldn't you? Thank you. Is there anything else? I'm sorry.
One more thing.
Pharmacy?
We're in discussion with our pharmacy benefit, Wisconsin RX. They're the administrator of our pharmacy benefit, to look at some suggestions that they have for reducing pharmacy costs. What I'm needing from them is more examples of what specific medications would be part of the change if we went to more of a formulary approach, and I don't have that yet. And so until I have that, I can't really determine if this would be a wise thing to do.
Yes.
You mentioned in the beginning that we may or may not need to vote on any of these.
Right.
You want
I was thinking that
the 2%.
the 2% would be the change to the rollover might be something you would vote on. It's a change within the plan, and it affects those people who are in the HRA. The limited flexible spending account, I wasn't sure if that would be something you may want to vote on that one, because it's setting up a new category for certain employees. The wellness is really just a change in our practice. It doesn't change any of the benefit, but changes the fact that the employee has to elect whether or not they're going to participate in the PHA. Nothing on the audit. The dental checkup plus, I think, is a change, although a good one might be something to vote on. So I would think maybe there would be
Those four.
1, 2, 3, 4.
4, okay.
Would be.
Does that sound good to everybody else?
Sure.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
reasonable.
All right.
That's it? Thank
That's
you
all.
very much.
No.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Chris. We do have a closed session, so we'll read that motion. Special board meeting closed session has been scheduled for Monday, March 2nd, immediately following the adjournment of the work session meetings. Pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.851C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, and pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.851F, considering financial, medical, social, or personal histories or disciplinary data of specific persons, preliminary considerations of specific personnel problems, or the investigation of charges against specific persons, except where paragraph B applies, which, if discussed in public, would be likely to have a substantial adverse effect upon the reputation of any person referred to in such histories or data or involved in such problems or investigations, to wit, personnel matters, and administrative alignment and workflow. Pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.851E, deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session, more specifically to wit, potential contracts. And pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.851G, conferring with legal counsel for the governmental body who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the body with respect to litigation in which it is or is likely to become involved, to wit, potential litigation matters. The meeting will begin in open session to consider the appropriate motion for a closed session so provided by law.
Second.
Sandy?
Aye.
Aye. Carried 6-0. We will meet across the hall.
I was going to try and create something and you really guys were I just wanted to let